Welcome to Landmark Talks Property, a podcast by Landmark Information Group that covers all things property in short and intelligent podcasts.
Welcome to the podcast. My name is Rob Gurney. I am the Managing Director of Oakersoft, which is part of the Landmark Information Group. Oakersoft provides legal software to conveyancing and private client lawyers, including case management. It's great to be here today. Prior to my role at Oakersoft, I was a qualified property lawyer for the best part of a quarter of a decade. I'll just pass across to Stephen, who can say hello and explain a bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Rob. So I'm Stephen Ward. I'm Director of Strategy and External Relations at the Council for Licensed Conveyancers. We're the specialist regulator of specialist conveyancing and probate practices. I've been there for about 13 years and actually had the pleasure of working with Rob when he was a council member for 2 terms on the governing council of the CLC. And I've been there for 13 years. Did I say that already? That's given me great insight into the conveyancing sector. And it's been really interesting because I came from the Law Society before that, which obviously looks at the whole of legal services. It's been really interesting to focus down on this sector, which is such a lively and challenging one, where there's always lots going on. And particularly at the moment, we're on the cusp of a lot of change, I think. So I think we've got a lot to talk about today.
Indeed. And as I say, we know what the title of the podcast is. So it's a big question, really, and a big sort of thing that impacts everyone in the industry, both conveyancing and more generally in the property market. But it's what we're trying to hit the nail on the head with here is why property transactions are still taking so long. Even with all of the technology that's currently available to practitioners. So, just to set the scene, part of Landmark, as I've already explained, and Oakersoft run a software program called IntelliWorks, and it's a very sort of long-standing and well-respected piece of software that helps lawyers move, from a case management perspective in terms of moving through conveyancing workflows as well as private client too. But anyway, we gather a lot of data, as you can imagine, and we can also look at different parts of transactions and sort of see how long things take from time to time. And we think that IntelliWorks is a good proxy for what's happening in the industry as a whole. Yeah. Simply because we have, a couple of hundred customers dotted all the way around England and Wales, CLC regulated and SRA regulated, and of various sizes, from sort of tier 1 all the way down to small private practices. So we think that we can sort of see what's going on within IntelliWorks and use that as a reasonable proxy for what's happening in the market as a whole. And our headline figures that we've released for 2025 is that it takes 123 days on average from instruction to completion of a conveyancing case. Now, we've got numbers going back to 2007. Yeah. In 2007, that number was 75 days. So we've seen, I think it's a 64% increase in the time it takes on average for conveyancing to happen from 2007 to 2025. Now, obviously, that's a big jump. It hasn't all happened in 1 year. It's been a gradual process that we've seen year on year. But most years from that 2007 number to last year, we've seen an increase. And I suppose that's contrary to reasonable expectation that, with the onset of technology, etc., that perhaps we should be more efficient rather than, on the face of it, less efficient.
Yeah, you'd expect.
And I think we'll talk later about consumer expectations, and I think it's fair to say that that number will be contrary to the consumer expectations.
For sure.
Do you want to any sort of brief thoughts on that link between time taken, and obviously, ultimate consumer satisfaction or lack of?
Well, I mean, there's so much in all of that, isn't there? That is an incredible growth in length of transactions in, a reasonable period, but nonetheless, as you say, when things should be getting better because the kit that lawyers are using is better than it was. But at the same time, we're still saddled with a very old system of conveyancing. So, we have digitized, well, not entirely digitized, we've computerized and automated some of the process, but there's a lot more to go. In terms of consumer expectation, I think the shocking thing, and I'm a consumer as well, is the difference between what we see going on in other sectors, the way that service has transformed in your grocery deliveries, or ordering your books or your underwear, whatever it might be online, organizing your travel, whether that's to come to this studio today or to travel around the world on holiday. The difference between that and this antiquated process that has had a few bits of sort of modern kit stuck onto the front of it to make it a bit less painful. So I think there's the legacy there of the underlying processes which haven't changed, and I think which need to change. The scope creep, which I think we'll come on to in what conveyancers are expected to do, and the increasing complexity of that work as a result. I think also, and it's a difficult subject, but we can't ignore it, is that the cost of, pressure on the cost of conveyancing has been intense from all kinds of quarters, and that has led to a slowing down as well. I think you've got higher caseloads in some cases, which are making it more difficult for the conveyancer to get the job done, because I saw, I don't know whether it was your report or another one I saw recently, was that most conveyancers were spending something like 4 days out of 5 just dealing with phone calls from people whether it's the estate agent, the lender, the client, chasing progress on the transaction, which leaves you 1 day a week to do the actual lawyering, which seems the wrong way round. So there's something else we've got to tackle there too. But I think that level of kind of badgering is probably a reflection of our changed expectations of everything being able to happen instantly, and us being able to see it all progress really, really, really quickly. I think the other thing to say, and I'll say this as a regulator, is that we're like the sort of proverbial boiled frog, aren't we, in this industry? The number has crept up, as you say, over those years, and each year it's a small increase, and then suddenly here we are, 120 days, and it's not acceptable, is it? It needs to change, and it massively contributes to the fall through rate, which is also very high, and something else that is very discouraging for clients, and which we know stops the housing market functioning as efficiently as it could do. So I think there's a lot to be won from tackling this problem. So let's see if we can sort it today.
Fair enough. There's a challenge. I always like a challenge. But you're absolutely right. That incremental increase is something that the profession almost just accept, or some parts potentially not even notice on a year by year basis.
Yeah.
But then when you look back to where we were, 15, 20 years ago, if you jumped straight from one to the other, it would be completely unacceptable, wouldn't it? So we definitely need to, sort of be aware of that context. So technology, then. Let's talk about it. There's for me, and jump in if you think otherwise. There's 3 categories of technology that I think is worth kind of talking about separately. Really, the first, as we've already mentioned in the title, case management systems. Most law firms that are serious about conveyancing use one. My understanding is that there's still quite a number that aren't, and I wonder how on earth they deal with their cases. But I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I supply case management systems to lawyers. Widely used. I would suggest essential from a consistency, comprehensiveness, compliance perspective, particularly if you've got teams of users rather than perhaps just individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing that case management systems do fantastically well is they keep matters progressing.
Yeah.
So if you're running a task-based workflow system, you always kind of know every day when you arrive at your desk what's
the next thing you've got to do
to move these matters forward. And perhaps if you don't have a case management system, you're using just your memory or your experience of what happens next. So case management systems is probably one category that we would sort of say, well, there's an element of efficiency there because you don't want to miss anything, and a robust case management system helps you avoid that.
Yeah.
But is it, is a case management system going to make conveyancing instant? Absolutely not, because it's not changing the process, which is what you've already mentioned.
Well, there's another thing, and you will feel the pain of this much more than I do, which is that case management systems can be great for progressing, and from my point of view, I like to see a case file all together in one place. So you've got all the information there. You can see a full picture of what's going on. But, they're used by people, aren't they? And sometimes adoption isn't everything that it might be. And certainly something we find when we go and inspect firms is that they have great case management systems, but they're not using them as well as they might do. So I think there's an implementation piece there for some firms where there's resistance. And I think we'll come back to the topic of resistance to IT later on.
Sure. Yeah. And then so the second level of technology, or the category that I wanted to sort of discuss, is what I would label ancillaries. And that's more, not something that's going to take the matter from A to Z, but something that perhaps is, less widely used or in totality, and perhaps just makes a certain part of the transaction better or more efficient. Those obviously ancillaries are additional, costs.
Yeah.
So that's potentially, every time you add something into your system or your uses, you're eroding that margin. And we all know that conveyancing isn't the biggest of sort of profit margins in legal services. So my argument with ancillary services is, they've all been designed to perform a role and to make things better, but it's like, here's an additional problem, Mr. Lawyer, and here's a piece of software that will help you with it.
Yes, yeah.
And again, I think it's fundamental to understand that the adoption of those types of software don't make things quicker than not doing it at all. So for example, if you didn't have the obligation to do something, then it's still quicker than having the obligation to do something and then using some software to help you.
To do it in the quickest possible way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Yes.
Because people think that if you use a lot of technology in your workflows and in your your cases, then things should be quicker. And it's like, well, they'll be quicker than not having that technology, but it's still going to be longer than not doing the thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Perhaps the one exception to that is ID checking, because that's. But when we look at the AML software, for example, or the tools that are out there, that's the perfect example of what you're saying, I think, isn't it? That it will streamline your AML work. It will help you get to the bottom of source of funds, source of wealth, but it's still taking you a lot longer to do that than before it was an obligation for license for conveyances. Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the third sort of category of tech that I want to touch upon is obviously AI. We're bound to bring that up, and I know we'll probably talk about that a bit later on as well. But artificial intelligence within conveyancing is a much more recent phenomenon, but it's also something that's constantly improving, constantly moving. So the example of a lawyer a year ago seeing what AI could offer them in terms of efficiency of transactions and deciding it wasn't for them.
Yes.
Well, that was a year ago. And,
absolutely.
There's been 78 different large language models been released since then. So it's not something you can go, it's not for us. This is coming, and it's always improving, always moving. And at some point, and I think we're possibly witnessing that sort of tipping point now, it's becoming more trusted and more accepted that, this is going to be the thing that helps us ultimately in terms of driving, future efficiency and having that big impact that we know we need to get to in terms of transaction times.
Yeah, well, especially where, and conveyancing is a great use case, I think, for it. There's a lot of data that you need to collect in for a conveyancing transaction. And sometimes it can be difficult to find the key bit of data that you need, whether it's in, the deeds or, something from wherever it is, surfacing that quickly and then dealing with it, whether it's to confirm that there is no problem or to surface a problem that needs tackling before you progress the transaction.
Yes.
And I think that's an area where I've seen it used very well. But as ever with new technology, you've got to be a bit cautious, haven't you? And, I've been a slow adopter of AI myself. The little Copilot button in the corner of the Teams thing that I've got at work, even if I just use that to produce bullet points from something for me, I read them very carefully to make sure they haven't missed anything, because I'm still very suspicious of it.
Yes, yeah. And, lawyers by their very nature are risk-averse creatures, aren't they? They have to uphold regulatory responsibility and act in the best interest of clients. So absolutely, everything should be approached with caution. But interestingly, we have a statistic here. 73% of conveyancers who were recently surveyed suggest that they're still hesitant with the use of technology, and in particular AI, and have cited concerns around risk. But as I say, I know we have a bit of a topic at the end of this podcast. If we get to it,
I'll give a quick plug for the new AI and tech guidance that the CLC produced last year on our website, which will help give, I think, firms more confidence in deciding what might be right for them.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll move on to the next section. And it's basically, so we've already said 123 days on average to get from instruction to completion of a conveyancing transaction. Now, and that's despite the fact that we have technology.
Yeah.
So the easy kind of and dismissive, response might be, well, technology is not working then, is it? Because, 20 years ago, we didn't have the tech. And it's now 64% longer with tech. What the hell's going on there? My sort of counter to that is that technology is working, with in capital I, capital S, and underlined twice. It's just that we don't notice it. It's not made things quicker. But imagine what would happen if you took technology away from lawyers. It would be glacially slow, right? Wouldn't we? I mean, so that's so I think what we're doing is we're almost plotting a trajectory where I think consumer expectation is following a path that the technology has not been able to keep up with.
Yeah.
And also the stuff that we've already sort of briefly mentioned about things like scope creep and additional responsibilities being added to the process, etc. We use technology in order to assist us with a lot of those new responsibilities that we didn't have 20 years ago, for example. So new tech adoption is making things more efficient. And I think, the way to look at that is if you took it away, the lawyers would take longer to discharge their responsibilities. So to say that tech isn't working is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Tech is working. It's just that we keep adding more complexity and time to transactions, and the tech can't keep up with that. It's falling behind.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that as a statement?
I mean, I definitely agree that the tech is working. I think that if you look at individual elements, as we said, like the AML, source of fund sources, wealth checking tools that you can use, clearly that simplifies things a lot. I've seen some great AI-driven tools around inquiries and looking at title packs and really saving a huge amount of time. And it should be said, not just saving time, but actually improving risk management, because the tools that I've seen are actually more effective at surfacing problems than people are, dare I say. We all say about AI, it's best if people work with the machine, and that's where you get the very best outcomes. And I think that's what we will see in conveyancing as well. But no, I think that so it's definitely speeding things up. My great example is ID checking, electronic ID checking, digital ID checking. Because before we went into the pandemic, I think about 50% of CLC regulated practices were using it. A couple of weeks after we were into lockdown, almost every practice was using it, despite the fact that it had grave concerns about shifting liability by moving to this new tool. That they said, oh no, I much more trust the paper, which is an extraordinary thing to say, than the digital process. So as soon as there was what we call a burning platform,
Yes.
People were persuaded to change, and that's sped up onboarding up immensely and reduced a barrier as well. And I think, though, that a big issue is how the technology is adopted. Because you said, you've got your case management system, which is very good at progressing the matter and helped you, work out what you've got to do next. And then you've got these plugins, which may or may not plug in, actually. If they plug in, that's fantastic and it's all seamless. If they don't, and you have to step out of your case management system and use something else, then that slows things down. And you've got stuff over here in product A that you need to somehow get back into your case management system. So that can sometimes feel, I think, a bit like burdensome to the conveyancer. But I think we're all learning about interoperability and how useful it is, and so on. The other thing what I'm trying to say there is that the really interesting thing is how you integrate the technology into what you're doing. I was having a fascinating discussion today with a provider of a tool that I won't say any more about, but one of the things they used as part of their tool was access to open banking, so that clients could provide their details so that all of that could be seen. And the number of clients that were allowing the tool to use their open banking information was way higher, like phenomenally higher than I'd seen it for other uses. And counterintuitively, that's because the tool doesn't set about getting the job done as quickly as it possibly could be done, but rather sort of holds the hand of the client through it so that they have confidence in opening up their financial details to the user journey. So the user journey, I think, is really, really important. And I think another example where I've seen really good uses of it as well is around the onboarding process. And personally, I've been through, because I'm freakish and buy and move house much more often than the average. I've had recent experience of onboarding with different law firms, and where that has been made very easy for me through a portal interface, and where the uploading of documents or the providing of open banking information, all that sort of thing, is made easy and even sort of gamified by sort of seeing little progress bars and, it incentivizing me to do the next thing. It'll only take 2 minutes. It's a bit like when you're on the penultimate Netflix show, there's only one more episode to go. It's like only one more set of data to go. Off we go. That's been incredibly effective as well. And I think that sort of thing really meets modern client expectation as well. Yes. So I think it's always about how you implement and implementing it really carefully and effectively. And as I say, not necessarily doing the obvious thing, which is trying to speed things up as much as possible, but trying to get the optimum process out of it that's going to deliver for your team and your clients.
Yes. And there's also something about, making sure that these good solutions become mass adopted. Yeah. Because, there's that whole adage, isn't there, of, lawyers only being as fast as the slowest person in the chain. But one of the things that I just wanted to pick up before we move on, Stephen, is the example that you gave in terms of, pre and post pandemic, the adoption of a new technique or a new way of doing things. Yeah. It just shows that, that kind of mass adoption is possible within the legal industry.
And this is a real frustration for me because we've seen it.
We don't need legislation.
We don't need legislation. We just need a pandemic. No, but this is what I mean. I was asked, about the Digital Property Market Steering Group, which is now chaired by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and all the regulators and representative bodies of everyone, all the professions that are involved in home buying and selling are engaged in it. I was asked at their launch event probably 2 years ago now. Can the market do this itself, or does it need government to legislate for this? And the answer is it doesn't need government to legislate for this. We could deliver the transformation of home buying and selling now that we would like to. That's change the fundamental processes and support that with IT that's really going to deliver that. Now. The challenge is getting everyone to move together.
Yes.
When there's so much concern about, well, where does liability sit in this new way of doing things, or by using this new piece of kit? Can I really rely on something that's provided by a third party? Well, you always have done. It's just come in a different format, and you've felt comfortable with it. So I think that is. Really, really significant and very, very frustrating, because I think that the future is there within our reach.
Yes. So it's definitely an opportunity. And so just sort of bringing us back to technology and also transaction timescales, which is effectively what we're here to discuss. Yes, there's a euphoric moment where we're kind of going, we can do this, guys. But I want us to bring us back down to earth with a bump here and talk about scope creep, which we've already mentioned.
Yes.
But I think it's fair to say that it's something that I feel very passionately about because like I say, I was at the coalface for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I saw what was happening. But my understanding is, and clearly, scope creep is getting faster and more aggressive in terms of the number of responsibilities that are being continually added onto the shoulders of the conveyancing lawyer. And my understanding is that lawyers think that probably those responsibilities have doubled in the last 20 years. So it's like, I have an analogy, and anyone that's heard me talk about this subject already has heard this analogy, so apologies if it's being repeated. But it's like, if you move away from where you work and suddenly double the distance in terms of your commute, then don't expect it to take the same amount of time. If your commute has doubled, guess what? It's going to take twice as long. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But again, what's happened is we've kind of drip fed these additional responsibilities into the process. We've not just suddenly gone, here's 100% more work to do, Mr. Conveyancing Lawyer, get on with it. Yeah. Because if that had happened, there would have been an outcry and everyone would have downed tools and gone on strike. Yeah. But we've drip-fed these additional responsibilities over this period of time. And it's a real issue that I don't think anyone outside of the legal profession truly understands.
No.
And certainly the consumer has no knowledge or care, let's be honest, of this at all. They just want to buy their house or sell their house. And you saying, but we've got the Building Safety Act to deal with now, and we've got to advise you on tax, and we've got to be a fraud detection specialist to make sure that you're legit, and if you've got solar panels on your roof, then that adds a complexity in, and if you've got Japanese knotweed in your back garden, then we've got to do this, and this. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's real, right? All of the stuff is real, and the consumer just doesn't really understand, or doesn't. Let's say don't care probably is not the right word, but has no appreciation of the fact that the job has doubled. And what can we do to stop that? Anything?
I don't know if it's realistic to try to stop it. I mean, look, the Building Safety Act is, nobody would say that's a good bit of legislation.
No.
Everybody is still. I think we're still struggling with it. It's been a case study in how not to achieve a policy outcome, I would say. AML is fantastic. Anti-money laundering is fantastically difficult work. And ultimately, it relies on a judgment of the conveyancer acting slightly as a sort of forensic accountant in working out whether the source of funds, the source of the wealth is legitimate, whether this transaction is legitimate and should go ahead.
And just to be clear, that didn't used to be a thing.
No, exactly. That's
we used to
not brand new because it's been here.
And we'd have a look at it and we'd go, yep, that's a bank statement, and put it on the file.
Yeah. So I have a lot of sympathy with conveyancers who struggle with that and who cite those sorts of things. And, the increasing availability of information. It's great that we now live in this information age and we can find out what the flood risk is for an area or even for, a postcode or a particular building. Then, what effect climate change might have on it, all those sorts of things. That is all great stuff to know, but it all adds to...
It's not conveyancing, is what I would argue as an ex-conveyancer.
Yeah. So I think the question is, how do we manage that? And I think it is by the adoption of technology to a large extent, but accepting your point that doesn't mean you're back to zero in the amount of time it takes to do something. Absolutely not. And you're not back to zero liability and responsibility and accountability either. We've moved on. But what we can get to is better management of those things. So I don't think we're going to be able to. We certainly can't roll the clock back.
No.
And I think if conveyancers and their representative bodies and their regulators are good at engaging with government, we might be able to avoid these kinds of things being quite so burdensome in future. But if we look at what's going on at the moment, we see the Treasury moving supervision of AML out to the Financial Conduct Authority. You might say, well, doesn't matter. We'll still have to do the same thing. Doesn't make any difference to us. It will be very different for CLC lawyers, for all conveyancers, but particularly for CLC lawyers, because they won't benefit from the close monitoring and supervision that we provide and compliance support that we provide. They will be one of tens of thousands of organizations regulated by the FCA. The FCA will have rules and guidance and all the rest of it, but you will be left to get on with it, and you'll find out when you've got it wrong, which is very different than the high-touch, supportive work that we do. So that is I mention that because that's an example of, I think, a change that's well-intentioned by the government, but is very much for the worse, and it's going to increase risk to conveyancers. As a result, and as we know, AML, it's a public interest issue. It's not a client issue. It becomes a client issue if your client's a money launderer and you need to sack them, but that's a different matter. There's that additional risk that's coming on, and you mentioned briefly the needing to register as a tax advisor with HMRC, which seems unnecessary, and again opens up risk, I think, because consumers might expect you to be able to give tax advice, and that's not what conveyancers have done. Right. If you need tax advice on a complex SDLT matter, go and get that and instruct me what to do. And that's as it should be, I think. So so we're seeing some backward steps there as well. So as I say, I think we've just got to say this is a direction of travel, and the world is becoming more complicated, and for good or ill, this is landing with the conveyancer. But I think, to your point about the consumer doesn't understand or appreciate all of that, I think that is something that's vexed me ever since I joined the CLC, actually, is that how can we educate consumers about the value of conveyancing to them? And I think if we talk too much about getting it done more quickly, we undervalue conveyancing, because conveyancing needs to take the time it takes, because it might be the wrong transaction for a client, for a buyer. It might be the wrong thing for them to do. And at the moment, the way the process is structured, it takes a conveyancer some time to get all the information in and to interrogate it and provide their advice. If we could transform the process, that could change. But that isn't about sheer speed. That's about getting at an earlier stage in the process a much greater degree of confidence that the transaction will complete, and more or less on what date. Well, actually, exactly on what date. Yes. And we've only people talk about Norway and the Netherlands and Dubai and Estonia. Scotland do it.
Yep.
So it's not impossible.
Yep. Okay. So my just closing remarks on scope creep is very much in the same vein as what you've just said in terms of the appreciation of the job. And I think it goes beyond just educating consumers, but it's potentially the rest of the property industry as well. I think there's an under appreciation of what a conveyancing transaction involves in terms of estate agents, mortgage brokers, lenders, etc.
Yes.
as well. And I'm not 100% sure that they also understand that the job's doubled. The job has doubled, and so therefore your expectations need to change.
Yeah. And perhaps lenders particularly, because you're working for them too.
Yeah.
and protecting their interests while being paid by their borrower.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that needs to be appreciated too. But I think you're right. Systemically, there are too many other players in the process who are keen to sort of G up the buyer and seller and keep them going and keep promising them, that it's happening, it'll happen soon. And if it's not happening soon, well, we just need to kick the conveyancer to do something faster. And that is unfortunate, but it plainly still happens.
Yes. One statistic I just wanted to throw in, because I think it's pertinent as well, is if we're talking about the conveyancing process in terms of responsibilities doubled.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think there's a link there between that and the inquiries process, which is, again, the additional inquiries process is something that's very sort of close to my heart, and we monitor that within IntelliWorks as well.
Yes, yeah.
I can tell you that from 2007 to 2025, that process has doubled as well.
Yeah.
So it's 100% longer to get from inquiries raised to inquiries resolved.
Yes.
Than it was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely a link there in terms of complexity and responsibilities and the number of inquiries that obviously plague conveyancing transactions and delay conveyancing transactions.
And how many of those inquiries are really necessary? I think there's too little thinking about what is this transaction and what do I need to know about this property.
Yes.
Rather than what do I need to cover my backside for all eventualities sort of thing.
Yeah. So this is the end of episode 1. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And we'll catch you again for part 2 shortly.